I don't think anybody enjoys being less than full. And there's another piece to that, which is, so there are lots of people who interact with somebody who's not taking advantage of them so much as being unkind, a boss that is making you feel small, or a friend, a supposed friend that's making you feel small. And if you said to yourself, nobody who's got it together behaves that way. And so what that would mean, you'd feel sorry for this person. And that immediately changes everything. By feeling sorry for them, you've changed the dynamic. There's nobody, again, who's got it together bullies. It's very powerful in all sorts of subtle ways to recognize that what you're doing is sensible or else you wouldn't do it. It doesn't mean you can't change what you're doing, but it leads you to have self-respect.
Dr. Ellen Langer, what relationship do you see between being manipulated and not being mindful?
Ah, well, it's interesting. I've said to people on occasion who I thought were using me that it's fine to use me as long as it doesn't leave me in a bad place. That it's always hard to understand people's motives, and they can start off with one thing in mind and then change it. And an example I used to use is there's somebody at a party who is you decide is a snob. And so you avoid the person. Where if you had decided the person was shy, you'd interact with them. And then even if they had been a snob, perhaps now they behave less snobbishly.
Mhm.
So it's not important to me what your motives are. It's nice when people are kind to each other, but I think it's important not to be thrown because people change their minds, often don't even know their minds. And but what you were getting at with the question, which is perfectly true, that when you're mindful, you have choices. When you're mindless, you're like a robot, so you have no choice. And so that puts you in some sense at other people's whims.
Mhm.
If those people are malevolent, then you're in trouble. But if
Right.
they're not, then it's less costly.
Yeah. And this has been a theme in your research through the years. There's a book influenced by Robert Cialdini that cites your study back from 1978 about cutting people in line. How does that work?
You know, yeah. Okay, so I had paid some attention. I found myself apologizing to mannequins if I walked into them and things of this sort. I said, this is kind of strange behavior. And I realized that people don't hear what's being said to them. They don't read what the words are in front of them and so on. So I did a little study, and one of the studies in that series, before we get to the Xerox one, was I sent a little note to people, lots of people, and I said, please return this immediately to, and then I gave the address. And everybody returned it. Now, I mean, if I wanted it, why did I send it? Since I didn't ask anything of them. So that seemed to confirm people's mindlessness. The Xerox study, we found that if you say to people, excuse me, may I get ahead of you? Let's see, what is it? Because, may I get ahead of you because I want to make copies? And what else are you going to do with a copying machine other than make copies? But when you said because you gave a reason, people complied. I don't think if you said, excuse me, can I take off your arm because I need an extra hand, people would have complied. But yeah, no, study after study over the last 50 years has shown me, sadly, that most of us are mindless almost all the time. And that the thing that people don't realize is that when you're not there to know you're not there. So you can't check in on yourself and say, gee, how mindless was I today? I did something the other day, just kind of fun. I gave the pro-sem to our graduate students and some colleagues there at Harvard. And I said, let's all be on the same page. So I'm going to throw out some numbers. And what I'd like you to do is just shout out the first number and then add each subsequent number I give. Should we do it? Okay, so 1,000. You're supposed to now yield
1,000.
back one plus 40
1,040.
plus 1,000
2,040.
plus 30
2,070.
plus 1,000
3,070.
plus 20
3,090.
plus 1,000
4,090.
plus 10.
4,100.
Yeah, okay, but nobody takes that long to
Right,
count these
I'm on
numbers.
camera.
Okay, so when I do that, you have a whole audience of smart people yelling out 5,000.
Right.
And when I show them their error, many of them don't even see it at that point because this whole thing is so silly.
And it was my
So
first instinct. I had to
yeah,
fight
I know I could
myself.
tell from watching you, but I said, okay, he's taking too long in between each
Yeah.
number. He won't do it, but so what? Chances are people listening to this added the numbers more quickly, and most of them probably said 5,000. Anyway, the
Yeah.
point is we're not there. And one of the reasons that we're not there is because we think we know. So
Mm.
the thing I think that everybody thinks they're sure of. So I try to rescue people who couldn't add 4,090 and 10 and get 4,100. How much is one in one? Brad, how much is one in one? Don't be scared. Because at this point, everybody is nervous. He can't even say it. He
2.
shows, okay, two. Well, okay, one plus one is two if you're using a base 10 number system. If you're using a base two number system, one plus one is written as 10. Who cares about number system? If you add 1 watt of chewing gum plus 1 watt of chewing gum, one plus one is one. You add one pile of laundry plus one pile of laundry, one plus one is one. You add one cloud plus one cloud, one plus one is one. Somebody sent me one the other day. If you have one pizza and you add one pizza, you have two pizzas. But if you add one lasagna to one lasagna, you have one lasagna. It's just a bigger lasagna. All right, so the point is that in the real world, one plus one doesn't equal two, as more often as it does. Now, think about it, because when you thought the answer was just two, there was nothing to think about, you weren't present, it had no meaning to you. Now you know the answer can be 2, 10, 1, and so all of a sudden you have choices. And those choices put you in the current situation, make you sensitive to context, perspective. You can take advantage of things to which otherwise would be blind. You avert the danger, not yet. You're there, essentially. And all because now you don't know the answer beforehand. So everything in our culture teaches us absolutes, not just one and one is two. We go to school, we memorize answers and do well on tests. And if we do well on the test, we think we know. So let me tell you, I was at an event, a horse event. This is now several years ago, but it's still is impressive, I think. This man asked me, can I watch his horse for him? Because he wanted to get his horse a hot dog. Hot dog? I mean, yeah. Horses don't eat meat. Anyway, he comes back with the hot dog and the horse ate it. And that's when I realized everything I thought I knew could be wrong. Now, I'm bizarre, I know that. So this pleased me rather than scared me because it meant all sorts of things were possible. And when you think about it, and as a scientist, science only gives us probabilities. These probabilities are translated into absolutes. It would be too hard to say these kinds of horses who hadn't eaten for these number of hours, who were given this amount of meat mixed with this amount of grain, most of them didn't eat it. Didn't eat.
Mm.
And that is too much of a mouthful, so we just say horses don't eat meat. But there are occasions and there are horses that do eat meat. And so when you recognize the ubiquity of uncertainty, everything is constantly changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. So we can't know. Nobody can know. And when you know you don't know, you sit up and you pay attention. And by sitting up and paying attention, noticing new things, which is the definition I use of being mindful, simply noticing new things, the neurons are firing, and 50 years of research has shown me that it's literally and figuratively enlivening.
Mm.
And so I question everything. And one of the things that I talk about a lot in the mindful body, but by no means the only thing, is the idea of mind-body unity. Now, it's interesting. I've been doing this for 50 years. It's a long time. And so before I was doing it, people were stuck in mind and body. In fact, the medical world at that time thought that, I'm sure they wanted you to be happy, but essentially believed that psychology was irrelevant. The only way you were going to get sick was the introduction of an antigen. Right? Everybody's had experience about how their minds and their bodies, as people talk today, are connected. A leaf blows in your face in the fall, and all of a sudden you're startled, your blood pressure and pulse increase until you say, oh, it was just a leaf. You're not in any danger. And so after these 50 years, finally people are talking about mind-body connection, but that's not right because then you still have the problem. How are they connected? How do you get from a fuzzy thing called a thought to something material called the body? So I said, this is nonsense. They're just words. So I said, let's take the mind and body, we put them back together. And when we do that, any place we put the mind, we're necessarily putting the body in the reverse. And then I do lots of studies, and the evidence to me seems overwhelming. And when you think about this, how important our thoughts are to our health and well-being, it's incredible that we have enormous control over our lives that many of us are not taking advantage of.
Hmm. And you're talking about
I don't know. Am
certain,
I supposed to let you talk? Because I can just go on.
you've got so much to share. You were talking about certainty as well. You've
That
written,
certainty is an illusion.
yeah.
Um, Things are changing, and you're holding still with your head, while all the while things are different. So let me give an example. So, Brad, I don't know if you're too young for this one to work, but you're driving a car and you're skidding on ice. What do?
We hit the brakes.
How do you hit the brakes?
Okay, now I'm trying to think mindfully. Are we talking about a car with anti-lock brakes?
Okay, so older people, if you ask your parents this,
Okay.
they're going to, with great confidence, say you gently pump the brake.
Mm.
Okay, because they learned for safety's sake, this is the way you stop the car. You gently pump the brake. Now, this is what they're doing from the time they learn to drive to the present. But you come along, you buy a car, now there are these things called anti-lock brakes, which your parents won't know. And what you do with anti-lock brakes is you firmly hit the brake. So even though we were gently pumping the brake for safety's sake, we keep doing it oblivious to how things are changing. And now that activity will get us into trouble rather than prevent accidents. Anyway, the point is everything is changing. Once we understand it mindlessly, we hold it still. One and one is two, period. But no, it depends on context.
Mhm. Yeah, you've written that certainty imprisons free will.
Yes.
We're talking about these sort of philosophical ideas, the mind-body unity, duality. What do you think free will is that is threatened by certainty?
Well, I think that, and when you're mindless, you're like a robot. And so if I asked you, do robots have free will? You say, of course not. And so you can only have a freedom to choose. You only recognize choices available when you're mindful. But again, the scariest part of it is that people are oblivious to how often they're just not there.
Mhm.
And in adding those numbers, we're nervous. What if you get it wrong? So that's not being mindful. What if you got it wrong? So who cares? And so all the stress we experience is a function of our mindlessness. That stress is not caused by events. Stress is caused by our views of events. If you assume there are certain things that are necessarily bad, other things that are good, so you kill yourself to get the good things, you run as fast as you can from the bad things, but the thing itself is neither good nor bad. And the more mindful you are, the more ways you can understand the advantages of anything that might happen. So you can just be still.
Yeah. So the certainty, it seems to be something that can be taken advantage of. A lot of people who I talk to are in the space of things like cults or dealing with psychopaths who are manipulative and abusive, things like that. And for people to understand this, how it can make people conform, you said a study, the Ash conformity study, about people looking at lines, another one of these things where you would
Mhm.
think the answers are obvious. What does that study tell us?
Okay, that wasn't my study. That was Ash's study.
Yes.
So you're presented with three lines of different lengths. So let's say one is an inch. You call that A. B is 2 inches. C is 3 inches. And then you're presented with a comparison line. So let's say that comparison line is 1 inch. Okay, so now you're with people and who are Confederates. They're working with the experimenter, but you don't know it. That you think they're participants just as you are. And they ask the first Confederate, um, seeming participant, which of these three lines is this comparison line most similar to? And what did I say? It was A. So he says B. And the next person says B. And the next person says B. Now it's your turn. You can see it's A, but you wouldn't dare say A. And I think we don't have to go to research to recognize this. All of us have had the situation where we're not sure what to do, and we see, what is that guy doing?
Right.
And then you feel safer doing it. Um, yeah, that I think the posture that we should all be assuming is different from what most people think success should lead to. Right now, people conflate confidence and certainty. And the best way to be, because uncertainty is ubiquitous, is confident but uncertain. And, so in a situation where you don't know, you just say, I don't know. You have to recognize there are other things you do know, and it's okay not to know, and that the fear of people judging you, um, I think is very sad because people will judge us often based on their needs, not on anything to do with us. So I do this thing with my classes, which will sound bizarre, but nevertheless it works and it's fun. I tell them, so the class meets is a large lecture at Harvard, and the class meets on Tuesday and Thursday. So I say on Tuesday, don't come to class on Thursday unless you're wearing two different shoes. Okay. Okay. So now it really shows you who's who. Like they show up. You have the bold ones who are wearing a red sneaker and a white sneaker, and then you have the shy people who are wearing two white sneakers where you can barely tell the difference, and so on. And I simply ask them, did anybody notice? And the answer is no, nobody even noticed. And if they notice, what are they going to think? If they know you typically wear a pair of shoes rather than two different shoes. And if they don't know you, does it matter? Because all of us walk around so afraid we're going to be judged. Now, here's something that I do discuss in the mindful body, which is interesting. No matter what you do, there's a way that somebody can turn it into something ugly.
Hmm.
Every single behavior description with equal power can be stated positively or negatively. So, for instance, you drive me crazy because you're so damn inconsistent. That's because you're flexible. You want to take me to task for being so trusting. Excuse me, for being so gullible. That's because I'm trusting. You can do it with everything. And so what happens, and that's why we judge people and we misjudge them, is nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, today I'm going to be gullible, inconsistent, aggressive, obnoxious, whatever we're calling people. And you get these people if you're in a relationship, and I'm going to change, I'm going to change. I mark the edge of the gullible continuum. I mean, it's really scary for someone of my age, if nothing else. But no matter how hard I work at changing to stop being gullible, I'm never going to succeed over the long term because my intention is not to be gullible. My intention is to be trusting. So as long as I value being trusting, I'm going to be gullible. Now that you, my partner, now know that every time I'm being gullible, it's because I'm being trusting, you don't ask me to change because you kind of like the fact that I'm trusting. It's nice. And I don't want you to change from your inconsistency because it's nice to be flexible and so on. We did this study forever ago where we gave people about 200 of these behavior descriptions. We said, circle those things you keep trying to change about yourself and you keep failing. So for me, I'd circle gullible, impulsive, doesn't matter what else. Then you turn the sheet over, and in a mixed up order, the instruction is circle those things you really value about yourself. My being trusting and my spontaneity. All right. So if you want to change your behavior or somebody else's behavior, you have to see from their perspective, why are they doing that behavior? And then persuade them that that thing that they value is not worth valuing. But that's not typically what happens. What typically happens is your relationship to yourself improves and with other people when we recognize whatever they're doing makes sense, or else they wouldn't have done it.
So knowing this about yourself, that you are so trusting and, as you say, gullible, what do you do to protect yourself?
I don't, what do I have to protect myself from?
Being defrauded?
Well, I
Um,
was actually,
yeah.
I was actually taken by two psychopaths, but, and I would still rather be trusting.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. When you're suspicious of everybody, then every day is bad.
Yeah.
And you can be suspicious. I can be suspicious of you, rightly or wrongly. If I'm suspicious of you wrongly, I've wasted all that potential for positive interaction. And if I'm right, what have I really protected myself from? Now, which is different from, these scams that all of us are exposed to these days. I don't think that one needs to trust offers that come over the internet or on your phone, your smartphone. But when you're dealing with people, I think more often than not, they should be trusted because, as I said initially, that even if the person is not so trustworthy, very often they change in the course of the interaction. I don't think anybody enjoys being less than, full.
Yeah.
And there's another piece to that, which is this is a remote association, but maybe worth mentioning anyway. So there are lots of people who interact with somebody who's not taking advantage of them so much as being unkind, a boss that is making you feel small, or a friend, a supposed friend that's making you feel small. And if you said to yourself, nobody who's got it together behaves that way. And so what that would mean, you'd feel sorry for this person. And that immediately changes everything. So here's a person belittling you, and you feel less than, and then you realize no one would behave that way if they were all grown up and big and secure. And so now, by feeling sorry for them, you've changed the dynamic. You feel sorry for the bully. There's nobody, again, who's got it together bullies.
Hmm.
It's very powerful
Yeah.
in all sorts of subtle ways to recognize that what you're doing is sensible, or else you wouldn't do it. It doesn't mean you can't change what you're doing, but it leads you to have self-respect. And when you have self-respect, you're more likely to be mindful. That if you weren't afraid of me, which of course now you're not, but when I'm asking you to add numbers, that fear is creating a distance between us. You're not enjoying what we're doing, and all you're doing is simple arithmetic. You know, and if you said what's if you got it wrong, I mean, did it matter? Well, you got it right, but most people get it wrong. So what?
Yeah.
I had taught my grandkids this little song that I wrote, a little ditty, based on an old Sara Lee commercial. The Sara Lee commercial, it was everybody doesn't like something, but nobody doesn't like Sara Lee. And my little ditty, I'm not going to sing it for you, it was everybody doesn't know something, but everybody knows something else. Everybody can't do something, but everyone can do something else. And when you recognize and you really, pay attention to all the things, all the special knowledge that you have, all the things that you can do. So what if you can't do something? And so for me, I love to sing, and I can't carry a tune. Although my friend Louise, when I say I can't carry a tune, she says, yes, you can, just not very far. Okay. Um, but why shouldn't I sing? There are lots of things that I can do. Do you see what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
it's interesting because while we're always telling people to be in the moment, you have to be in that moment mindfully, because many times when people are in a moment, they act as if their whole future depends on what's happening at that moment. And so they tend not to be real. which is sad because so we have lots of data that when people are mindful, other people find them to be authentic and trustworthy. So people know, they don't know what to call it, but they know. And that means the converse of that is also true, that when you're pretending and you're not there, people know. So you're not really fooling anybody anyway.
Mhm.
So there.
To give people a framework on something you're talking about earlier, being confident but not necessarily certain. Do
Not
you have
necessarily not certain.
that too?
Okay. Confident but uncertain.
Confident but uncertain. You have these different levels of thinking, and that you can be in a very different mind state, but have your thinking actually look the same in terms of how things are presented. So, just to give people that framework, what are those levels of thinking?
Okay. Well, it's okay. Um, level one, I'm going to use the New Yorker, which it's a wonderful magazine, but it doesn't sound wonderful in this example. But you have level one people who read the New Yorker. Excuse me, who don't read the New Yorker. Level two people who read the New Yorker. Level three people who don't read the New Yorker anymore. So level one and level three look the same to the people at level two. Neither level one or two, or three are reading. But they're very, very different people. So let's take most people and take little kids, and they're uninhibited. And then most of your listeners, most people are inhibited. And then you see an older person who is mistakenly seen as a child who is considered uninhibited, but no, they're disinhibited. I know the rules. And sometimes these rules are just stupid, so I don't follow them. It's not because I'm childish. It's not because I'm uninhibited. It's a level three. And the problem is when you're evaluative, and you're most people who are evaluative are at level two, you see those people who are actually beyond you in development, and you see them as less than. And it happens all the time. You know, that, and we'd all prosper by assuming that whatever that person is doing makes some sense. That's what we were just talking about. And then if you assume it's a level three, you grow even if it had been a level one. Even if the person never read the New Yorker, and now they're not reading it anymore, well, if we get the New Yorker example, it seems, sort of pablum, to say to people, always think the best. But when you think the best, you're learning something in the situation. And the three levels suggest that when you're thinking the worst, you may simply be wrong, and yourself then operating in a way beneath you. Another example of that, there are many in the book. These examples are not overwhelming, but let's say a woman drops her cane, and level one person doesn't run in to help her. Okay, wow, what a bore, what a selfish, nasty. Okay. Level two runs in and picks up the cane. But level three might wait a moment because that woman is probably going to feel better if she can figure out how to pick up the cane herself. So level one and three are not helping, but they're very different people. And so before we saw that person not help, and we said, my goodness, what a bore, what a selfish, whatever. But no, perhaps there's something else that was operating. Do you see what
So,
I'm saying?
yeah. And
Yeah,
so,
and it's mindful because you're aware of the fact that there are many potential explanations for any activity.
yeah, that's kind of the last thing I was going to get at was so the third level, if we kind of layer mindfulness over it, that third level is where the mindfulness matches up.
Yeah, because you know that it could mean several different things.
Mhm.
And so you have choices again. When you're mindful, you always have choices. When you're mindless, you never have choices.
Mhm.
And you just think about it, people are eager to be happy, I presume. Can robots be happy? And of course not. And yet most of us go through the day like robots. And I think the biggest ailment out there is stress. And that's, you know, not quite a robot, but not quite all one could be. Events don't cause stress. Again, the view you take of the event causes stress. And I have a few one-liners that people seem to find useful. And friends of mine, they put it on their refrigerator, which they constantly visit. Okay. Next time you're stressed, ask yourself, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? It's almost never a tragedy. I missed the bus. I broke the dish. I screwed up the meeting. I couldn't add to 5,000, whatever it is. And then you breathe a sigh of relief and you go forward, putting everything back in perspective. But if you said to yourself, think of the last 3 times you were stressed. Did the event even happen?
Mhm.
And almost never. So you're wasting all that time. Now, people get stressed because they think that if the event does happen, they'll be better able to handle it because I'm ready for it. But in fact, stress wears you down. And so you're less able to handle whatever comes your way. It serves no useful purpose. And, stress requires two things. It requires a belief that something's going to happen and that when it happens, it's going to be awful. But prediction is an illusion. And I spent a lot of time with a very different view of prediction and decision making in the mindful body. People think they can predict. They think they can predict because they can post it. They can look back and say, if I had done this. But going forward, what am I going to say next? You have no idea. What are you going to ask me next? I have no idea. Is my internet going to go out? I have no idea. The thing about prediction is that while we can predict to the group, you can't predict the individual case. So let's say um, you're going to go start up cars on a Mercedes parking lot. Chances are they're all, most of them are going to start. And more of them are going to start perhaps than at a used car dealership. However, would you wager your entire life savings and all your future earnings, and I'll double that amount, so it's a very good bet to take, but that any Mercedes that you pick at random will start. Who knows? Smart people do stupid things. People get things wrong. Michael Jordan might miss a foul shot. I mean, we just don't know. You say, so you can't predict and all you really care about, most of us, most of the time, is the individual. You tell me out of 10 people who've had surgery, 8 of them did very well with the surgery. Well, that's great. I'm happy for them. But I want to know, is it going to work for me? And that we can't be sure.
Mhm.
Okay, so prediction is an illusion. So if you say to yourself that the stressor, what are, this prediction you're making that this bad event's going to happen, give yourself 3 reasons that it won't happen, 5 reasons if you want to be smart. And all of a sudden you went from feeling it's definitely going to happen to maybe it won't happen and you feel better. Now comes the fun part. Let's assume it is going to happen. It does happen. What are the advantages to that actually taking place? Because nothing cuts in any single way. All right. And as soon as you can see the advantages, somebody's afraid their spouse is going to leave them. Well, that's scary, but if you're worried about your spouse leaving you, you're not in a good relationship to start off with, right? Because a relationship requires 2 people and one of you just isn't there. So in the long run, it would be to your advantage. You're worried that you're going to lose your job. Um, if if you were valued at work, you wouldn't lose your job. And who wants to go someplace 40 hours a week, every week, where you're not valued? And so over time you realize that these things are good things that happen to us. I tell a story in the book because I know people can say when I talk like this, what do you know from your ivory tower? I say, oh boy, you don't know. I've got lots of terrible things, seemingly terrible things that happen, but let me just tell you one. So it was around Christmas. I was out at a friend's house for dinner. I come back, and all my neighbors are outside because my house had gone up in smoke. I lost 80% of what I owned. So that sounds pretty bad, right? The next morning, I call the insurance agent. He comes over and he says, this was the first time in his 20 years at the job where the damage was worse than the call. Everybody, oh my God, oh my God. And he sees it's not so terrible. But for me, I had already lost all of the things that I lost. Throwing my sanity after it wasn't going to help. Okay, so now I'm living in a hotel, the Charles Hotel, for some time. While my house is being rebuilt. And it's Christmas. And I go out Christmas Eve and I come back, and my room at the Charles Hotel is full of gifts. Not from the owners of the hotel, not from the management, but from the so-called little people. The people who, the chambermaids, the waiters, waitresses, the people who park my car. It took me years, Brett. I mean this quite literally, before I could tell the story without it bringing tears to my eyes. And every single Christmas, I'm reminded of this. I don't remember what I lost in the fire.
Right.
But the net result of all of this was it was a very meaningful experience for me. Now, things in and of themselves don't affect you as good or bad. If you seek bad, you'll find a way of finding how everything is awful, but you can just as easily turn that around. You know, that you can, just as in relationships, you drive me crazy because you're so inconsistent, or aren't you wonderful because you're so flexible? It's all a matter of my thinking, and I'm in control of what I think as long as I'm mindful.
And I think something you're getting at too here is that risk is the subjective thing in
Yes.
general. So what do you make of courage then if our own
Well, there
risk
are
is
all of
subjective?
these words that we have that separate us. There are some people who have it and some people who don't.
Mhm.
And I think we're much more alike than most people realize. If you felt what I felt, you'd do what I did. So you and I put our hands on a radiator, and I take my hand off, more quickly than you. You can say, "Wow, look at how I'm able to endure." No, it just didn't hurt you as much as it hurt me. And so I tell a story with courage that's kind of interesting. I think his name was William Peake, and I think it was the Spanish Civil War. It might have been the Spanish American War. It matters. It doesn't really matter for the story. And there's this battalion he's in, and they're out fighting. And the person in charge, the officer in charge, tells everyone to duck. He didn't duck. Because he didn't duck, he saw where the enemy fire was coming from. And because of that, they won the battle, and then he was awarded a Medal of Honor. And when he was asked, why didn't you duck? He said, I didn't hear it. Okay, now with a lot of us, as soon as someone praises us, we're too quick to say, yeah, aren't I wonderful? And you just accept the compliment, even though it's because you didn't duck, metaphorically. And that's not good, because the next time when you don't behave in the way everybody is now expecting, because now you do hear, duck, you're disappointed in yourself. I think that we all do what makes sense to us, or else we wouldn't do it. And realizing that, we end up with self-respect. And so I think we have much language out there that tries to set us up as good guys, bad guys, people who are better other than others, and one that would seem far from what we're talking about right now that bothers me. We have people who are super tasters. We have people who are super memorizers. We have people who are super agers, and as soon as we have a category like that, it suggests that the rest of us can't achieve it. And so then we don't even try. And I think that whatever they're doing, we can do also, maybe not achieve it as quickly or as fully, but we don't know if we don't give it an effort. And the categorical distinctions, once I tell you you're a C student, you're no longer going to try in the same way that the A student, even if I randomly gave out the grades. So our labels that we have for ourselves and for other people become self-fulfilling prophecies. People don't realize that we all do hypothesis confirming data searches. What does that mean? You ask yourself a question, and whatever you're asking, you can find evidence. So if you say to yourself, how are you wonderful? You're going to find evidence that you're wonderful. But just as certainly, if you say, how am I awful? You're going to find evidence. So we have to be careful about the questions we ask. And when we're evaluating ourselves, we can use those negative terms, that I'm um, inconsistent, gullible, um, uh, I don't know, obnoxious, whatever terms come to mind, and find evidence, even though if we looked at that in its positive light, we'd also find evidence.
Knowing all this, when you have a big decision to make or something, I wonder what your process is. I have a friend who she's applying to medical residency right now, and she is just absorbing so much information, spending so
Yeah.
much time and energy on it. What's
Okay,
your
so
process?
so okay, so here, this is an important thing to read in the book, even if you don't read it. We'll read this in the mind body research.
Got your book right
You
here.
will be surprised. Let me give the bottom line, which is rather than waste your time trying to make the right decision, just make the decision right. Now, you make a decision to take action. As soon as you take that action, you can't assess what the alternative decisions would have been. All right. So okay, then number one, number three. Number one is probably when you can't make a decision, it's because the alternatives are psychologically the same. If they're psychologically the same, it doesn't matter what you decide. Do I say to you, do you want A or B? Yeah. Give me whatever you want because it doesn't matter. But the same thing if your wife says to you, do you want to go to Paris or Istanbul? And you can't decide. It's just because psychologically they're equivalent. Now you can gather information, but how much information? When do you stop? There's no natural endpoint to it. And the next piece of information. So you decide you're going to Paris, and then, oh, you just found out things in France are not very good right now. Oh, so you made the wrong decision. There's no way to know in advance. It's uh, Decisions are based on predictions. And I've already said prediction is an illusion. So, if you're making a decision, should you go to Paris or Istanbul, the assumption, and let's say you've been to both places in the past, the assumption would be now, 10 years later, it's going to feel the same. Why should it? Everything about you is different, everything about the place is different, and so on. You can't predict how you're going to respond. Anyway, it sounds more complicated only because I wasn't expecting you to ask me this right now. It's laid out very neatly in
Yes.
the book. The
Yes.
important thing is that um, it's irrational to do what all these decision theorists say you should do. It's irrational to do a cost-benefit analysis when every cost is a benefit and every benefit is a cost. It's not, I say to you, somebody else, do you want to meet my friend Brad? He's very flexible. Sure, I want to meet him. You want to meet my friend Brad? He's very inconsistent. No, I don't want to meet him. All right.
Yeah.
And that's true for every single cost or benefit that you can come up with. So that's not going to tell you what to do. People are lost in their regrets, and that's all mindless. A regret is as if if only I had done that other thing, life would have been grand. But that other thing could have been better, worse, or the same. In fact, it's nothing. It all depends on the way we think about it.
Hmm.
Um, so I tell my students, I did this when I was teaching this advanced decision course. And I say to them, I want you to spend the week, don't make any decisions. No decision at all. Just flip a coin if you're given two alternatives. or use some other rule of thumb. You're always going to do whatever the first option is that occurs. And so they come back the next week. I said, so how was it? And essentially, the owner, oh, what a relief. There was no stress because we feel stressed because we think there's a right answer. And there is no right answer that one can discern, you know. And so, it turns out that when you're given a choice to do something or not do it, that we tend to feel good when we do it because since we're doing it, we make it work. I don't want to go to the party, but I should go. Brad's going to be upset with me if he put so much time into arranging this. All right, I go to the party not wanting to go. It would be stupid of me to spend all the time at the party being miserable, right? So I make myself enjoy it. And then I say afterwards, it's a good thing I went to the party. I had such a good time. Had I stayed home and was mindful, which most of us are not, and started doing something that was meaningful to me, even just, catching up on one of these wonderful TV series, but I'm fully engaged in it. I'm fully relaxed, having a good time. And then I speak to Brad and he says, "Oh, Ellen, you missed the world's best party." I say, "I'm really glad your party was a success because I know that I too had a meaningful evening." You see, but if I'm
Hmm.
mindless when I'm not going, and I'm mindful when I'm at the party, of course the party is going to win. If I were mindless at the party and mindful at home, it would be the reverse. When you're mindful, all you're doing is being there, noticing. And when you're noticing, you're engaged, the neurons are firing, and it's exciting. It's the way you are when you're having fun. And it's so easy, and all follows just by knowing you don't know. You came to see me in my house now. You've never been here. You don't have to practice anything. You walk in, you'd notice. Oh, did she do that painting? What books? What is that strange thing there? Everything would be potentially interesting. Anyway.
You have such a knack for recognizing things that might be a sort of a false dichotomy or finding a third way. One thing that you write about is forgiveness and how we
Oh,
often
so
see
this
things in
is
life.
very funny. Okay,
Yeah,
so years ago, I was asked to give a sermon at one of the Harvard churches. I say yes to virtually everything. It's more fun saying yes than no. And then I think, oh my goodness, I don't know anything about religion. And even if I did, I'm Jewish, so I don't know anything. Still, I said I would do it. What am I going to talk about? So I think forgiveness. It sounds religious. It's not, but I could get away with it. I mean, the sermon is not going to mark my life. So I start thinking about forgiveness. And what I come up with, Brad, is sacrilegious. Okay. If you ask 10 people, is forgiveness good or bad? What are they going to tell you?
it's great.
Yeah, forgiveness is great. Yeah. If it's good. Okay. If you ask 10 people, is blame good or bad? What are they going to tell you?
Bad.
It's bad. But now think about it. The only way you can forgive is if you first blame. So our forgivers are our blamers. Now, do you blame people for good things or bad things? You blame people for bad things, but things in and of themselves are neither good nor bad. So what do we have here? We have people who see the world negatively, who blame and then forgive. Seems to me hardly divine. Now, if you blame, it's better to forgive, than not. But there's a better than better way, which is to understand why they did it in the first place. And that understanding obviates the necessity for forgiveness. I don't want anyone to forgive me. If I've hurt your feelings, it wasn't my intention to hurt your feelings. Um, and I can be sorry that your feelings were hurt, but my action was taken for some reason that made sense to me, or else I wouldn't have done it. Going back to what we were saying before. But here you have we have lots of these expressions out there that they sound good, but they're very limiting. Okay, so if you blame, you should forgive. But if you understand, you don't need to blame in the first place. So there's no necessity for forgiveness. The one that I enjoy is hope. Hope is good, not really. Hope is better than being hopeless. But hope has built into it Failure. When I go get coffee in the morning, I don't hope there'll be coffee there. The very act of hoping opens up the possibility that I'm going to be disappointed. Try. This is the Yoda study that we
Yeah.
did, which I didn't realize when you do it. You don't try to eat an ice cream cone. You just eat it, right? So trying again has built into it an expectation for failure. So I find, just listening to people that there's so many ways that people unwittingly reveal their low expectations for themselves. And that's sad to me. And anyway, I think that in a very simple way, it sounds kind of hallmark, and I don't need to put down hallmark, but it's very real that life only consists of moments. That's all you have. And if you make the moment matter, the moment matters. And it doesn't matter if you're in Turkey, we said, Istanbul, or you're in Paris, France. If the moment is full, it's full. If I'm at your party or I'm home relaxing, the moment isn't a better moment in one situation or the other. If you're present, you're present. You see what I'm saying? It's sort of like we're a glass, and when the glass is full, it's full. And the only way to make it full is this active noticing. And the only way we do this active noticing is by being aware that all the things that lead us not to notice, that certainty, is illusory. Everything is changing. We can't know. Nobody knows.
Well, Dr.
And
Allen
so,
Langbaum,
okay, I'm sorry, go on.
so I was just going to say, before I get to our last topic, for people who want to learn more from you, where should they look for you online?
I think just put in my name and too much comes up. Excuse me. I think, yeah, my website, at the moment, I think it's ellenlanger.me. If you go to ellenlanger.com, it'll also take you to me.
Great. We'll put a link to that in the description and a link to your book, The Mindful Body. I'll just say that again in case the audio caught that. Take your time.
But no.
Okay. We'll put a link to that in the description and a link to your book, The Mindful Body. And my last topic is about health. And we actually have a question from one of our listeners. Her initials are AM, and she asks, when it comes to health, what can we control with mindfulness and what can't we control?
We can control virtually everything. So if we go to what I started to say before about mind and body, that if we see the mind and body as a single unit, then wherever we put the mind, we're necessarily putting the body. Let me answer it by giving, I had maybe 10 studies described in the book that are fun. Let me just pick out two. The first one was a counterclockwise study where we took old men to a retreat that we retrofitted to 20 years earlier and had them live there as if they were their younger selves. And as a result of this, putting their minds back in the past, their vision improved, their hearing, their strength, their memory, and they look noticeably younger. In a more recent study, we inflict a wound, a minor wound, but still a wound, and we have people in front of a clock. Unbeknownst to them, the clock is rigged. For a third of the people, the clock is going half as fast as real time. For a third of the people, it's going twice as fast as real time. And for a third of the people, it's real time. And the question we're asking is, will that wound heal based on your perception of time, clock time, or just real time, whatever that may mean? And it turns out it heals based on perceived time. That clock is determining how quickly you heal. We had people who had type 2 diabetes show up. We give them lots of tests. Then we put them in front of a computer and it has a clock, another rigged clock. And they're told play computer games, but change the game you're playing every 15 minutes or so. That's just to ensure that they'll look at the clock. All right. Again, the clock is rigged. Twice as fast, half as fast, or real time. And then we measure blood sugar level. Blood sugar level, again, follows clock time. We have so many studies like this. Um, we have studies with fatigue. You wake up in a lab, you see the clock, it tells you got 2 hours more sleep than you got, 2 hours fewer, or the amount you got. Biological and cognitive processes seem to follow perceived amounts. And then what I also, most people are aware of placebos, and placebos may be our strongest medicine. You take this nothing, it's a sugar pill, but you think it's something, and then you get cured. So, great indication that it's your mind that's doing the healing. So, towards the end of the book, I provide psychological treatment for chronic illness called attention to symptom variability, very easy. And we get people showing enormous reduction in symptoms for multiple sclerosis, stroke, Parkinson's, arthritis, chronic pain, I mean, a host of very real disorders. When you're told that you have a chronic illness, most people hear that as you have no control over it. And all it means is that the medical world doesn't have a treatment for it, not that you don't have any control over it. So, what we do with these people with any of these illnesses, we call them and we say, how is the symptom? And is it better or worse than the last time you called, and why? That does several things. The first, by doing this whole thing in the first place, you don't feel as helpless. Second, as soon as you see your symptoms are fluctuating, nothing stays, no matter how much pain you're in, it's never exactly the same from, moment to moment or, hour to hour. And by asking yourself, so you feel good, then you say, oh, it's not always maximally awful. And then by asking yourself why, what you engage in is a mindful search, which itself is good for your health. So remember, some of the early studies, we make elderly people more mindful and they live longer. I mean, the effects are very real and robust. And finally, I believe you're more likely to find a solution if you're looking for it. Now, we called people, but most people have smartphones. Set the smartphone to ring in an hour and ask yourself, how is the symptom? Is it better or worse than the last time? Then set it to ring, 2 hours, an hour and 20 minutes, whatever you want, and just keep doing that throughout the day. So you see that the symptom is varying, and then try to figure out why. And the good thing about this is that there are no negative side effects. And you don't have to do this in place of seeking medical treatment. But very often there's a long delay between when you first go for whatever the treatment is until you're going, let's say biopsy, and then, when you're going to go again. And what do you do during that time? Most people just worry, and I think they'd be better off doing something like this. So to answer the question, I mean, that's just part of it. When you recognize that everything that is was at one point a decision, that means there was uncertainty. And who decided? People different from you, meeting different needs from your own. When you really understand this, that, you're playing tennis, as an example I like to use as a tennis player. The rules for tennis weren't handed down from the heavens. Somebody decided it's two serves. Well, two serves, it'd be better for me if it were three serves. First, I throw up, I kill it, it doesn't go in. I throw it up, I kill it again, now I'm better at learning that fast second serve. And it still doesn't go in. I have my backup third serve. So my tennis ability is less than it might be because, somebody else's rule is the rule I'm following. To make this a little clearer, when I'm lecturing in person, I'll see is there's somebody very tall in the audience, and I attract very tall men for some reason. There's always a man 6'5", more. He comes up to the stage and we look ridiculous. Here I am, 5'3", here he is 6'5". And I just raised the point, should we do anything physical the same way? Which seems ridiculous. His hand is 4 inches larger than mine. And so I get, the bottom line, we're running out of time, so I can't give example after example, but the bottom line is that everything is malleable. Everything. And so when something is upsetting, doesn't work, doesn't fit, change it. Because the reason it is as it is because other people at another time decided that that's the way it should be. Yeah, anyway, so period, this was fun. I think I've probably overwhelmed your audience.
Well, you have an overwhelming body of work that you've made over this career. Thank you so much for the work that you do, for your book, The Mindful Body, and for taking this interview with me. I'm so grateful that you said yes.
My pleasure.